From the iconic design of HAL 9000 to the ship's interior, circles are everywhere in the classic film 2001: A Space Odyssey. Perhaps the only shape more iconic would be the imposing, perfectly rectangular monolith that appears throughout the movie, pushing humanity forward through phases of our evolution. This video will explore how both of those shapes were deliberately chosen to represent the natural and the unnatural. Space Station 5 is one of the first examples of how circles are used to represent the unnatural. This whole station is basically one large centrifuge for artificial gravity, and the set design is fairly accurate to what would likely be built in real life. Showing this curve in the set itself helps show the idea that being out here is unnatural, but it doesn't mean that it's bad. This set is calm and quiet, which is certainly an appeal to visiting space. On the flip side, the first time we see a major rectangle is when the monolith appears in front of the apes. If the monolith is a representation of the future of humanity, then it appearing at the start before any major circles show up tells us that rectangles are the natural, or the human. After all, it's hard to come across a perfect circle or sphere in nature, but it's easier to find rectangles and cubes in things like crystals and rock formations. My favorite shot from the film is when Frank Poole walks around the ship after jogging. The jogging scene itself is very impressive, but this scene builds upon that even further by doing this. He walks around to the other character who's just sitting there for the whole shot. By walking around in the artificial gravity circle, the film is demonstrating how unnatural this environment is, but because there's humans in it, it's still a human environment. The jogging scene is also similar in the sense that it's unnatural gravity, but what's even more interesting is the design of the ship itself. It has a lot of both rectangles and circles, but the front of the ship that flies head first through the unknowns of space is a giant sphere. The pods themselves are also spheres, though just a bit smaller. Flying through space itself isn't natural, but it's in our nature to push into the unknown. Hal is perhaps the most iconic sci-fi villain of all time. His one circular red eye has influenced other movies, such as Otto from WALL-E. Its design is also reminiscent of a Cyclops, a monster that is most famous for being an antagonist in Homer's Odyssey. Its perfectly round, all-seeing eye represents how Hal is everything that humans aren't. Engineered robotic perfection. And yet, it's a human creation. The server room is filled with rectangles, showing how even the unnatural robotic perfection is still created by something natural, acting as almost a comfort in the fact of the atrocities the circular eye committed. The ending is where the rectangles truly shine. The eerie yet homely feeling environment lit up by huge squares on the floor. It's creepy and unsettling, but it's most distinctly human. The monolith itself also acts as a comfort for the dying David Bowman. And yet, something representing humanity can still act in unnatural ways. For example, how we witness Bowman's life come full circle. From dying of old age to being reborn as a fetus observing Earth through a glowing circle, we see the entirety of his life come back around to the very beginning. This progression is inherently unnatural. One cannot return to a former state while considering time as a linear path. The film does not argue that being in space and pushing against the unnatural is a bad thing, just that it's unnatural. It's human nature to push back against the natural in order to progress, and that's not necessarily good or bad, it just is. Hal was a perfect robotic being, as opposed to the imperfection of humanity, but in the end he was still created by and for humans. In the end, the film says that what we consider natural can come full circle and become unnatural as consequences for our push for progression, and the circles act as a warning against that push.